Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It has been 1,000 days since Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, just hours after Ukraine appeared to have fired U.S.-made ballistic missiles into Russia, likely for the first time, the Kremlin published changes to its nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for what would justify a nuclear response. So will there ever be a resolution to this war? I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. And thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. Do you think the conflict in Ukraine will be resolved soon? And how has it impacted you or your family? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call 1-800-825-5950 or just hit pound 690. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. So it has been 1,000 days since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, and all signs point to the war escalating even further. Ukraine appeared to have fired 6 U.S.-made long-range missiles into Russia after U.S. President Joe Biden removed sanctions on their use, and hours later, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved changes to his country's nuclear doctrine, allowing an attack from a nuclear state backed by a nuclear power to be treated as a joint assault on Russia. So we want to hear from you. How should the world respond to the escalation? And are you from Ukraine or have friends or family that have immigrated to BC? What does this 1,000th day mean to you? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, and email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us now is Florian Gassner, Associate Professor, Department of Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies at UBC. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for taking time with us. So, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told the European Parliament today that they must press President Putin towards peace. But that was just hours after Ukraine reportedly fired these missiles into Russia. So, what's the latest, I guess? Where do we stand now on this, a grim anniversary, 1,000 days of fighting?
It seems like we're at a pivotal moment in the conflict because not just due to how long the conflict has been dragging on, but also because of the change of government in Germany that's imminent, the change of government in the United States, the change of government in Canada that might be coming eventually, the possible changes in France coming along. It is the question whether or not the international community will maintain both its support on Ukraine and its pressure on Russia, including working to make the sanctions really work, for the sanctions to really bite, in order to put Russia in a position where they will negotiate and where they will accept a peace.
Well, and that's just it. So Ukraine's allies, allies such as the U.S. and Canada, they've put these sanctions on Russia. But what impact have they had so far?
It's very difficult to say because on the one hand, we have these verified reports of Russia's so-called shadow fleet continuing to export oil and gas, which is the main resource for funding the state of Russia. But at the same time, there are also reports of things in Russia just starting to break down, that especially the rail system, which is the central nervous system of not just the Russian society, but the Russian economy, becoming less and less reliable, that trains are just standing in the middle of nowhere for a month until they can move on because they don't have enough people to drive the trains, or they don't have enough engines to move the cargo through the country. So it does seem that the economic situation in Russia is grim, and their interest rates are, I think, close to over 20% right now, the basic interest rate. So they seem to be struggling at the same time.
Is there any sense that their support for the war or for Putin himself is being degraded in Russia?
There are no major indicators for that. There are videos often, of course, being circulated on social media of mobilized troops protesting or revolting, but those are typically incidental. The Russian soldiers are dying en masse on the battlefield. Their casualties are through the roof, but at the same time, the Russian society seems to be by and large unmoved, and the Russian president seems entirely unmoved by the suffering of his own people.
I'd love to have our viewers join our conversation. They can always call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or by emailing bctoday@cbc.ca. Let us know your thoughts on this 1000th day of the Ukraine war, if it has impacted you and your family, and if you think there will be a resolution to this soon. We're speaking with UBC professor Florian Gasner. Florian, Putin has lowered the threshold for using nuclear weapons. What exactly is at play there?
It's an attempt, I suppose. This is probably the 30th or 40th red line Russia has drawn. Originally, it was delivering anything but defensive weapons, then it was delivering armored personal carriers, then it was delivering tanks, and it was the ATACMS system that were now shot into the Kursk region. And then it was attacks on Crimea or Sevastopol. And every time these red lines have been crossed, nothing happened. Nothing came about. And that has to do that in some ways the international community is still working. Fairly early in the war, it became apparent that both India and China made very strong arguments towards Russia to not ever use nuclear weapons, because that is the famous Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Because the reason other countries don't have nuclear weapons is because those who have them say, we won't use them. But if suddenly they are in use, then Taiwan may start nuclear armament, which would be detrimental to Chinese interests, for example. All other countries, any country that feels threatened by its neighbor, will start taking on nuclear arms, and that's a situation that the emerging global superpowers like China and India desperately want to avoid.
And when we hear, I think most people, at times we maybe become a bit, not callous, but we don't pay attention to all of the details of the wars that have been ongoing around the world. But when we hear nuclear, that strikes a chord in people, that strikes a chord of fear in most people. By getting sort of this I guess, wording and these topics at play, does that sort of provide an impetus for really the world to get more involved to resolve this?
That is at least what the Russian president is banking on. Anytime there is a situation that deteriorates the Russian standing in the conflict, he immediately starts talking about nuclear weapons. And that's every time that in the West, then there's a stronger impetus to say, well, maybe Ukraine needs to sacrifice something or maybe give up some territory. And at this point, it's been repeated so often that it's almost tired. But of course, you should never stop taking it seriously, because it is a serious threat. They have nuclear weapons. But at this point, it's also a scare tactic to move people in the Western community to suggest or entertain the idea of giving more concessions to Russia.
All right. And what are your thoughts sort of on what signal is being sent with U.S. President Joe Biden, allowing Ukraine to use these missiles?
Well, unfortunately, or depending on which side you're on, fortunately, but unfortunately, there are still limitations on their use. So our understanding is that currently they're allowed to use those weapons in the Kursk region and not beyond. So they can't fire wildly or randomly into the Russian territory to attack ammunition depots and so forth. So it's again a piecemeal advantage granted to Ukraine. But at the same time, it indicates that in the West, hopefully there's a renewed sense for how serious the threat is, and that it is it's strange and unserious to not provide Ukraine with the weapons and the abilities to defend itself.
Right.
When we saw it 2 nights ago, Odessa is visited by an attack of missiles and drones that is unimaginable. and then not allow Ukraine to fight back properly.
And we did receive an email from Caroline that sort of speaks to that. And she says, why has the world tolerated this illegal invasion of Russia into Ukraine and dictated that Ukraine defend itself with one hand tied behind its back? Finally, after 1,000 days, maybe Ukraine has a chance to actually defend itself by attacking the Russian military resources inside Russia. And I suppose there is that sense that Ukraine has been left without the full, capability of defending itself at times. We would love to have more emails and calls, so please do call us at 604-669-3733. You can also email us 1-800-825-5950. No, that was toll free. You can email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. Florian, Russia has stationed North Korean recruits at Ukraine's borders. I'm curious how other countries that are sympathetic to Russia are involved.
That is the big problem with the sanctions in particular, that you saw once the sanctions against Russia came into place, trade from Germany to Russia, from France to Russia, from the United States to Russia plummeted. But where did trade between Russia and the other countries go up? Turkey to Russia, Georgia to Russia, Azerbaijan to Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all these countries who typically have very little trade are indirectly supporting the war by importing technologies or exporting technologies to Russia they previously imported. And China is the biggest supporter here in providing so-called dual-use technologies, so chips that can be used for both civilian and military uses, and getting them through the back door into Russia. So sadly, the support Russia is receiving from other countries is still significant, even if these countries can tell themselves that they're not directly supporting the war effort.
Are we feeling any impacts of that war here in BC?
Massive impacts both on a personal level and an economic level, because on the one hand, even before the war, Canada was home to 1.4 million people who identify as Ukrainian in one way or the other. So if you have a group of 35 people, one of them will identify as Ukrainian. So everybody of us knows somebody who themselves maybe was born there or has families there. So I travel up the Sunshine Coast from time to time and I see the Ukrainian flags everywhere and the people are around. And on the other hand, and this is something that often gets lost in the political debate, the inflation. The inflation, the economic instability that we've experienced over the past 2 years, that started with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that sent energy prices through the roof, and these energy prices then came down and affected our pocketbooks. That's as simple as it is. This has been exacerbated by the war in Gaza and the blockade, the effective de facto blockade of the Straits where all the goods would be coming through. So these wars have a direct effect on Canadians' quality of life.
And what are sort of any future impacts that we could see if this conflict continues, both short and long term?
In the long term, it's just, it continues to keep things unstable. The economy will remain volatile. Elections will be swayed by all of these things. You cannot get away from this. This is, even though located on just one front line, which is still almost 1,000 kilometers long, this reverberates everywhere through food insecurity in Africa because Ukraine is unable to export its grains into that direction, to just completely messing up the commodities and especially the oil and gas market, because there is so much of this black fleet going around and reactions by the OPEC states that you cannot predict where this is going. It'll just keep things unstable for the longest time.
And when this conflict first started, did you expect it to last this long? Are you at all surprised, or did you feel like this had the potential to be a very long-term war?
There was a point in the third or fourth month, especially, where there was the hope that it could be concluded within a year. And in this case, and this is a bitter truth, the fact that the West did not send support quickly enough, did not send financial support, did not agree to send weapons that they had, that was a mistake. If the war could have ended within a year, that is debatable, that's a philosophical question.
Sure.
But this is where an opportunity was lost to shape the direction of the war.
So you think,
And once that had happened, all the people, and there's so many people about who are smarter on this than I, at that point there was the just realization, the coming to terms with that this is going to be a very long engagement.
so do you feel, I sense, that the West in a way failed Ukraine?
It failed Ukraine, but you also have to consider it failed Central and Eastern Europe in a larger sense, because this type of dithering, this type of waiting things out is not new in 2022, because the war in Ukraine was going on in 2000 since 2014, and the West, after like 7 or 8 years of deliberating, finally decided, okay, let's send them Javelin anti-tank grenades, but they're only allowed to store them in the West because they're supposed to be defensive weapons. And it's Ukraine in 2014, but also it's Georgia in 2008, where Russia encroached on foreign territory. It's Chechnya in 1998 and 1994. It's Georgia in 1993 again. It's Moldova in 1992. That in the West there has been this failure to understand that these are not just local skirmishes, but that this is part of a larger geopolitical enterprise, which consistently is moving outwards to occupy more and more territory to expand geopolitical influence. And Russia remained unchecked for so long that at a certain point you can understand them for keep pushing the envelope.
We do have a call now from Justin in Nanaimo. Hi, Justin. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. What are your thoughts on the 1,000th day of the Ukraine
Well, I'd like
conflict?
to say this is like the new norm that we're going to be into, and it's sad to say, but all these other countries are getting involved in other people's political shit, like funding their politicians and stuff like that, and sending money to their campaigns and stuff like that in different countries, and organizing that kind of stuff. So when you're encroaching into somebody's other personal space like that, things are bound to happen, right? It's just the same as what's going on in the U.S. right now. Look at how tempers flare with certain people getting into power down there, right? So when you have outside forces funding campaigns to certain individuals, they're not going to like it, right?
Right.
I mean, look at how much U.S. has funded Zelenskyy before he was even president for his campaigns, right? And then that's why Russia got involved in raping their campaign or their election in the U.S., and they're saying, oh, well, you guys are doing this to our campaigns, right? So
sort of
the
playing
U.S. has no business being there. I mean,
All right.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you have to defend innocent people for sure, but don't start it.
All right. No, I appreciate you sharing those thoughts. Randy writes, the issue is now Ukraine using American and UK weapons inside the Russian Republic. The provocation represents an escalation that may result in World War III. Florian, President Zelenskyy said 2025 will be the year that the war ends. Is that being overconfident, or is that a feasible timeline for a conclusion?
Let's say it's aspirational. I'm sure that he sees a pathway to that, but it does in the end come down also to international support and pressures, because there's analyses out there right now around how long Russia can still financially and economically sustain this war, and that would be for a couple of years still. So there still needs to be a concerted effort to support Ukraine if you want to see Ukraine. Like, there won't be a washout victory. They won't fight Russia back to its own border and then just kick them out.
Right.
But they need to be put into a strategic position where Russia will finally accede to negotiations, which is something they to this day rule out any direct conversations with Zelensky, even not even negotiations, just a conversation
Right.
with Zelensky. They've never had one. And so this is where international support and pressure is necessary.
And we're almost out of time. We've got about a minute left, but President Trump coming in, he has claimed that the U.S. will be involved in ending the war, but hasn't provided any details. Do you think the U.S. will play a role, though, in ending this?
I would not rule out the option of the United States completely severing its ties because it seems to be going towards an isolationist period in its own history. But it wouldn't make a lot of sense considering the platform that the incoming president is running on, because the caller before was talking about all the money that Zelensky is getting, and that is one of the major misconceptions. All of the money the United States is spending on the war, they're spending on themselves.
Okay.
They are buying weapons for Ukraine, and where are they buying it from? From themselves. So if you look at isolationist economic policy, the war in Ukraine is an economic boon for the United States because they are getting to invest it all back into their own military industrial
Right.
complex, which is highly profitable.
And I appreciate you making that point. Florian, we are right out of time, but thank you so much.
Thanks for running the program. Appreciate it.
Florian Gasner, Associate Professor, Department of Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies at UBC. It is 12:27, and this is BC Today. And the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelenskyy, gave a virtual address to the European Parliament today. He's urging the EU to push harder against Russia.
Putin is focused on winning this war. He will not stop on his own. The more time he has, the worse the conditions become. Every today is the best moment to push Russia harder, and it's clear without certain key factors, Russia will lack real motivation to engage in meaningful negotiations.
Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau also addressed discussions at the G20 about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Leaders released a joint statement yesterday that highlighted the human suffering in Ukraine. It did not mention Russia, but did call for peace. Trudeau was asked whether the language was strong enough.
No, it's not strong enough for me. We have been unequivocal that Russia is responsible for not just the illegal invasion of Ukraine, but the knock-on consequences on food insecurity around the world, on rising energy prices, on disrupted supply chains, on uncertainty and insecurity for people around the world that are worried now that the rules-based order no longer holds. So yeah, I would have wanted to say things a lot stronger.
Trudeau said he also supports continued military aid to Ukraine and that he agrees with the U.S. approval for Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike Russian territory. Today marks the 1,000th day since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there's much more on this story on the CBC News app. And it is time now for the CBC News to 12:30.
Good afternoon. Forecasters are warning of hurricane-level wind gusts as a so-called bomb cyclone forms off of Vancouver Island. Wind warnings are in effect for the coast, with Environment Canada saying gusts up to 120 kilometers an hour will develop. The storm could trigger power outages and flash floods. The Ministry of Transportation is reminding drivers that conditions can change quickly and to be prepared for winter road conditions. BC's new health minister will have an expanded portfolio after Premier David Eby folded the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions into the Health Ministry. Vancouver Island MLA Josie Osborne is the new Minister of Health, replacing Adrian Dix. She says there are advantages to bringing the mental health and addictions file back into health. And officials say nobody was hurt after a cargo jet ran off the runway at Vancouver International Airport early this morning. The runway will remain closed for 2 days and will affect flight schedules at YVR. There's no word on what led to the incident. And now the forecast, as we mentioned, extremely strong winds are expected to blow through coastal regions starting this afternoon. On the north coast, windy with a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 6. Highs to -11 with snow in the Peace. In the central interior, a bit of sunshine with a high of -5. Highs around 0 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a chance of flurries with a high of -1. And a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon in the Fraser Valley, mainly cloudy in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria. Windy in many areas with highs around 8 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Robert. Have you battened down your hatches?
Sure I have, whatever that means. Yes.
Nobody knows. You just have to say it.
That's right. Yes, I have.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good. Get them nice and tight. Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
And yes, as we brace for what is being called a bomb cyclone here in BC, a lot of people are worried about the damage that it could cause. And to explain what this weather event truly is and what impact it might have on you, we're joined by CBC science and climate specialist Darius Mahdavi. Hi, Darius.
Hello.
You've been a busy boy today.
A little bit.
So, bomb cyclone, it's a very dramatic term. And I think a lot of people are really feeling on edge about, what potentially could happen tonight. So tell us some more.
Right. So, dramatic term. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of these supposedly new weather terms.
Right.
We've been calling fast developing storms weather bombs since the 50s.
Yeah.
So, this is not an out there term, but I know it sort of hasn't been introduced to the public until like a decade ago. So, it's pretty new to a lot of people, but it just means that a storm is developing very quickly. And in this case, it's more than doubled the criteria for how fast it's developing to meet the criteria for a weather bomb. Okay. So, to meet the criteria, you need to drop your central pressure by 24 millibars in under 24 hours. That's a pretty rapid drop in pressure. This storm, though, dropping 50, maybe even 60 millibars, where we're seeing drops of 15 millibars every 3 hours. I know those numbers don't mean a lot to a lot of people, but that's extremely fast development. The storm is going to drop to a pressure in the center, similar to what you'd see in a Category 3 or 4 hurricane in the Atlantic. So we're not going to see major hurricane level impacts, but they could be quite strong. This is definitely a strong storm. This is the kind of storm where you want to bring in your patio furniture.
Right.
Make sure that if there's any dead branches on your property, make sure you clean those up. We could see hurricane force winds rushing through some of the valleys and inlets across BC's coast, especially. But even inland valleys could see very, very strong winds, outflow winds, pulling as just all the air from overland rushes through all of those corridors to try and fill in the low pressure off the shore.
Okay.
So wind is definitely the big concern this time around.
Is it comparable to sort of any storms we've seen in the recent past?
We've seen strong windstorms before. I think what's notable about this one is how widespread those winds are going to be. I mean, winds gusting over 100 kilometers per hour are expected for virtually everywhere on the coast of Vancouver Island. Most places probably going to see 80, 90 kilometers per hour, even on the east coast of the island. But many places, including downtown Victoria, could see gusts up to 100. Some places on the west coast of the island could see gusts up to 150 kilometers per hour. Fortunately, those are mostly unpopulated areas on the west coast, which is a little bit of good news, but still very strong. We're going to see waves, especially off the west coast island in places like Tofino, 6 to 8 meters high. So very, very major waves, a possibility for some coastal flooding there. Very high precipitation amounts, mostly in the mountains. So big dumps of snow. Mount Washington, for instance, could get a meter of snow over the next few days, which is definitely significant. I'd say in terms of comparing it to major storms, we're lucky in this case that it's not going to move over land, staying out in the ocean. That's really our saving grace here.
I was just going to say, but I would think with that rapid snowfall that perhaps the avalanche danger will be rising up, which is sort of the first we've had that obviously this year.
Yes, that's true. Wind slabs are a big concern. So it's often an early season formation that causes avalanches. The Avalanche Canada is going to start issuing daily updates in terms of avalanche risk starting this Thursday for the coast, already started for parts of the interior. So keep an eye on those.
All right. And you mentioned it quickly off the top, bomb cyclone. I think people hear it and they think it's some new term that the media has made up to sort of, gather more views or get attention. But it is an old term, and we're actually seeing a return to the more scientific names, are we not?
Yes, atmospheric river, bomb cyclone, these are terms that
Yeah,
have
it's not a
existed.
Pineapple Express anymore.
Right. I mean, you can call it a Pineapple Express. Just atmospheric river is sort of a more general term. For it to be a Pineapple Express, has to originate near Hawaii, basically. But an atmospheric river can come from other places as well. This time around, there is an atmospheric river, but it's heading for the states, sort of Southern California, Oregon. They're going to see an atmospheric river, and it is actually a Pineapple Express.
All right.
But I think these terms are very useful in terms of communicating the intensity of a storm. I mean, when people hear atmospheric river, especially here in BC, it lists a lot of emotions given what we've
What
seen
has
before.
happened.
Exactly, with an atmospheric river. And I think it's difficult to separate the emotional aspect of that from the sort of scientific technical definition, where it's just this stream of moisture moving through the atmosphere. And that is very reasonable. I think 2021 was the time a lot of people were introduced to that term for the first time.
Yeah.
But it gives you an idea of what you can expect. An atmospheric river means prolonged moisture. Bomb cyclone means very strong winds. These are things that we can hopefully start to allow us to communicate better with the public.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate what a busy day you're having, but you'll be keeping everybody updated tonight on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news.
Will do, yes.
Awesome. That is Darius Mahdavi, our CBC Science and Climate Specialist. And BC Ferries has already posted a number of cancellations for this evening, so please check bcferries.com for the latest information. It is 12:37, and you are listening and watching to BC Today. And we'll have lots more on the day's top stories on the afternoon shows in your region. Here in Metro Vancouver, this is what's coming up on the coast.
It's Gloria Makurenko here, and I'd love for you to join us for On the Coast this afternoon. We'll be hearing about how BC Parks Foundation has been working to restore salmon spawning habitats in Pitt Meadows. Also, Vancouver has a vibrant dance scene, but it's one we don't really talk much about. On the show today, we're going to kick off the discussion about the richness of the community and the challenge of reaching a wider audience. So I hope you'll tune in between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
Gloria Makarenko, thank you so much. And you can hear On the Coast on Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. And stay with CBC News throughout the day. We will have more updates on today's weather bomb on our hourly news updates at 6 o'clock on CBC Television and anytime online. You can also download the free CBC News app on your mobile device. And if you have a power outage or you're low on data or battery power, remember you can visit a text-only version of our website. It uses less data and will load more quickly for you. It's called CBC Lite. Visit cbc.ca/lite. That's LITE. Well, they say you only get one chance to make a first impression, and for some, that first impression can be a step towards financial security and peace of mind for themselves and their families. But for many, there can be barriers that can stop them from finding that success in the workforce. So what's it like for women returning to the workplace? What has your experience been as a woman finding a new job or changing careers? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, for 25 years, Dress for Success has been supporting women and gender diverse individuals reach their full potential. And joining us now is the Executive Director of Dress for Success, Amanda Safey. Hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how did Dress for Success come about?
Well, 25 years ago, Vancouverite Astrid Levelt was watching the news. And on the news, she spotted Dress for Success worldwide. based out of New York. And that organization, the first location of our 135 worldwide Dress for Success locations, was empowering women by providing them the professional suiting that would help them get their feet in the door. So she took the initiative here in Vancouver to found our local affiliate with a donation of $5,000, a number of volunteers helping her out. She started the Dress for Success Vancouver in the basement of a church in East Vancouver.
And it seems like such a simple concept, but it can go so far. And I mentioned it off the top. It might sound glib to say, you know, you only get one chance at a first impression, but it does impact people's perceptions of you. It also impacts your confidence in how you present yourself. So what are some of the various ways that you are helping, you know, these women and gender diverse individuals? It's not just making sure they have the proper blazer to go out in the world.
Right.
How are you fundamentally supporting them?
Yeah. So our work began with our dressing services, which provides professional attire for both interviews and new employment. But in the last 25 years, it's also grown to include a really wonderful mentorship program called the Professional Women's Group that pairs women who are looking to advance their careers with a mentor and puts them in a cohort of women who are also looking to advance their careers for a 6-month period. One of the most important things that this program does is it helps our clients build social capital. So it helps them build the relationships, make the connections that can help them take that next step in their professional journeys.
And for a lot of women, you know, that are mothers, it can be very isolating, and you sometimes lose those connections that you maybe did have prior to having children. Is it a lot of mothers that you sometimes are helping as they try to reestablish those connections and get back into the workforce?
We do support a number of mothers. In fact, about 30% of our clients are single mothers. But you know, when we look at our clients and we support them, we're looking beyond, you know, their identity as a mother and how else they might be fulfilling themselves professionally.
That is such a wonderful thing as a mother to hear that you aren't just seen as that, because you were a person before, you're still a person after, and that doesn't change. What are some of the, I guess, more common issues or barriers that women do face when it comes to, you know, not just getting a job, but keeping it and excelling in their careers?
Yeah. When we look at wage parity and we look at what women earn, a lot of the times that's impacted by access to childcare. It's impacted by the gaps that they may have experienced in their professional journeys. But we also see a number of our clients who are newcomers to Canada. They're refugees and immigrants who may have the experience, they may be ready to go, they simply don't have the connections to get started.
And I was going to ask you, that was sort of my next question, but that, you know, we do have so many immigrants here in Canada, and some of them are coming from incredibly well-educated backgrounds that are not allowed to practice in their, you know, their fields here at this time. I guess maybe walk me through the process of how somebody would access the help that you provide and what you could do for them.
Yeah. So Dress for Success Vancouver doesn't directly support our clients with accreditation or retraining, but we work with about 75 different community partners who work with newcomers, who refer their clients to us, not only for dressing services, but also for these mentorship and workshop programs that we have. And that really allows them to connect into the community and to lean on the relationships in their careers that will support them.
And we would love to have people join the conversation if they can. You know, if you have had trouble entering or re-entering the workforce, maybe as a woman you've found that you needed some help finding a new job or changing careers, we'd like to hear what it's like for you in the workforce. Call us at 1-800-825-5950 or 604-669-3733. You can also email your experience, bctoday@cbc.ca. We're joined by Amanda Safey, the Executive Director of Dress for Success Vancouver. Amanda, a new report card just came out today from Campaign 2000, End Child and Family Poverty, and the number of children falling below the poverty line is increasing in Canada more than it ever has. Is it more difficult for women to find not just jobs, but jobs that pay adequate enough for them to support their families?
Yeah, I think that the simple answer is yes. That when you look at the living wage here in Vancouver, which is just under 51,000, and you look at the number of women who make significantly less than that, it's about half of the women here in the city, right? But the barriers to securing and retaining those higher paying jobs that will allow them to live comfortably and sustainably here in the city do include childcare, which I mentioned before. It includes, even access to transit, as an example, being able to get to work when you may have to live further out of the downtown core where your job might be. So I think that we live very complex lives nowadays, and we're not only encountering the intersectional barriers of being a newcomer, of being a woman, of being disabled or racialized, which are pieces that many of our clients are faced with, but it's also the logistics of the lives that we live today, and sometimes part-time employment that may be barely paying the bills is what our clients have access to.
Are we not doing enough? I guess, as a society, are we sort of failing women and their families? But also, is the government not doing enough? Would you like to see the government, providing more support, making it easier for women to excel in their chosen work?
On that, I can speak to my personal experience. So my son is 7.5, and when I was returning to the workforce after my maternity leave, childcare was a scramble, and it was also very expensive. But around that time, the provincial government was introducing the $10 a day pilot, and that is one of the things that, in a very tangible way, supported women to be more engaged in the workforce, to be able to support their families, allowing their families to thrive, their communities to thrive, and will thrive for future generations.
Yeah, it can have such a huge impact.
Yeah.
On not just one family, but it's really is a ripple effect on how in society we kind of impact each other, and it just trickles down, and also sets that example for children to see that their parents are supported and not alone. What sort of feedback do you hear from the clients, from the women that you help? What do they tell you after they've come to Dress for Success Vancouver?
Yeah. I think that it's the way that we help clients feel. It's the connection that we provide that gives them that boost of confidence that allows them to pursue something a little bit bigger that will allow them to sustainably support themselves. The connections that are made among our cohorts, among our community members, really propel women forward and open our clients' eyes to a different way forward.
And I hate to always turn it back to politics, but the recent U.S. election, it really raised a lot of issues around gender and gender inequality, and more broadly the way, maybe ways women are viewed and treated in families and in the workforce. Have you seen any of that impact here in terms of the people you help, just in how they're maybe internalizing that message, how they're feeling? Because I think for a lot of women, it was a bit of a blow to realize that maybe they hadn't come as far forward as they had thought.
Yeah. I think that it's exciting to think of how far we've come in the 25-year history with Dress for Success.
You've seen so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are incredible programs supporting women through maternity leaves to retrain into new fields, supporting them in non-traditional fields as well. At our heart, Dress for Success Vancouver is a feminist organization, and feminism is all about choice. It's the choice to pursue the employment that you want to pursue. It's about the choice to earn that living and provide for yourself and gain that financial independence, when and if you need it or want it. And I think that the election results in the States were certainly a blow to feminism, and we're all feeling it for sure.
Yeah. I would love to hear for people to share your feelings, to share your experiences as a woman in the workforce, or any difficulties you've had, or if you've had any experience with Dress for Success that you would like to share. You can call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. The people that do come through Dress for Success, that you help, that go on and find employment, that thrive in their careers, do they keep in touch? Do they come back to sort of pass that experience along, or help out with the organization?
I think that one of the biggest strengths of our community is how women pay it forward.
Right.
And I'd love to share an example. So at our Success Luncheon tomorrow, we'll be welcoming almost 500 members of our community to the Fairmont Waterfront to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And just a couple of weeks ago, we got a pretty panicked email from someone who really, really wanted to come on board as a sponsor. And while we were sold out, we were able to accommodate. And the reason it was really important to do so is the individual shared the story of how they themselves were a Dress for Success client when they arrived to Canada.
Wow.
That individual now is the principal at a law firm, and she's in the position to bring her community to the table in support of Dress for Success, and make that difference for other women in the same way that she was supported when she first arrived.
That's incredible. And, that speaks to obviously how important it is. Is there ever any pushback that people feel that this somehow isn't important, that it's frivolous, or this is what we shouldn't be focusing on, the appearance? How do you sort of push back against that and explain that it is an odd dichotomy that you are a feminist organization, but you're also being realistic about the way women are viewed in society still?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, starting earlier this year as executive director, I realized pretty quickly that one of the biggest challenges I was up against is moving beyond the messaging that we're just about clothes, because we're not just about clothes.
No.
It's about so much more than that. I think that the message that I really want to make sure is heard by the community is that it's not just about the women and gender diverse clients that we're helping today. It's about allowing them to access good employment that will give them financial security and independence, that will benefit not only themselves, but their loved ones, their family, children included, their communities, and generations to come. So it really is a ripple effect that is seen when you support a woman today and really empower her to make the choices that support herself and her family.
And if somebody is wanting to access that support, how do they do that? How does somebody get with your organization and get your magic touch and your insight and all of that support?
Yeah. The easiest way to do it is to go online and visit us at dfsvancouver.ca. From there, women and gender diverse clients can self-refer to our programs, but we also have a number of partner agencies who connect their clients to us for the support that we provide.
All right. And we do have one call from Trace in Vancouver. Hi, thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts on this?
Hello, thanks for taking my call.
Of course, thank you.
I'm a computer programmer, retired, and I just wanted to talk about all the amazing courses in computer skills, computer programming that are available for free if you can put up with the ads on YouTube. And so I think this is a resource that everybody can use, and there's some great courses. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Trace. And there are so many resources online. Not everybody has access even to a computer, though. And that sort of speaks to the inequality that I would assume you're very well aware of and wanting to work against, because there's not a level playing field for people in terms of what they have access to and the benefits that it can afford them.
Yeah, I think an equitable piece of any kind of reskilling is the opportunity to earn some sort of income as you are reskilling. And there are programs out there that will allow individuals to do that.
Oh, okay. on the flip side, if somebody were wanting to help out with your organization, because I would think there are many women that, perhaps were in that position once and did access help, not just with your organization, but had somebody that gave them that boost, that lifted them up. How can somebody sort of pay that forward and help with Dress for Success?
Right. First and foremost, our donor community is what makes our work happen.
Right.
So making a financial donation, whether it's a one-time or a monthly gift, really does make a difference for us. But the other piece that sustains our organization are our volunteers. And we simply can't do our good work without them. So we have about 400 volunteers per year who are in our boutique as volunteer stylists. We have mentors who work with individuals one-on-one for 6 or 12 months. We have workshop presenters who are all volunteers sharing their expertise with our community. There are lots and lots of different ways to engage in order to ensure that our organization is around for another 25 years.
Well, and that is just what I wanted to ask. We've got about, just over a minute left, but it's been 24 years. That is incredibly impressive. And you have affected so much change. What's next? What do you see the next 25 years for Dress for Success looking like?
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of coming in as a new leader is looking at things with fresh eyes. And together with our board, we have our sights set on scaling up our impact and ensuring that we stay relevant to the community that we're serving. So I think that what we're doing well. We want to build on that and ensure that we're reaching even more clients with the programs we're offering.
All right. And we're just going to take a very quick call from Barbara. She has a quick question. Hi, Barbara. What was your question for us here?
It was kind of a comment.
Okay.
That just a second. It was kind of a comment that it's great to know of opportunities to donate items where hopefully, I think this is true, the person doesn't have to pay for them because that also helps with a barrier for getting, a wardrobe for work.
Absolutely.
Is that you don't have to pay for it, and that helps extend other, monies in the family.
Absolutely, and I think judging by your vigorous nodding of your head, that's exactly what Dress for Success is aiming for.
Yeah, that's what our organization was built on. So all of our services, including our suiting services, are provided free of charge.
Thank you. We have to wrap it up there, and that is our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us.